Welcome back to the RH Vodcast, powered by Hong Kong, an authentic lifestyle brand inspired by our home city's melting pot of cultures and charisma. They ship worldwide. You can shop online or visit the Hong Kong store. Our guest today is Mark Francis, a seasoned executive in the fintech and executive search industries in the Asia-Pacific region since 2007. Mark is the co-founder of Zetl, a fintech platform that provides non-dilutive financing to SMEs across the region. He is also the founder of Tyros, a private investment firm that invests in early-stage startups across the fintech, HR tech, ESG, and Web3 sectors in Asia. In addition, Mark has co-founded Silverstrand and Cleverly Search, recruitment service providers for financial services and built environment. Mark's extensive experience and expertise in these industries make him a valuable guest to learn from. We are very grateful to have him here. A warm welcome to you, Mark Francis.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So let's get started. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your early life, your background, education, and how your early career started for you.
Sounds good. So starting at the beginning, so I was born in Hong Kong. So this is my home. My dad came over from Wales in 1969. Wow. My mum was born in Ceylon, as it was then. She came over as a 10-year-old in 1964. And they met in the 70s, and then I arrived in the 80s. So, Hong Kong obviously was a really exciting city, especially at that time. Lived in Hong Kong, went through the ESF system here, which I think one of your co-founders might have also done. So lived through that experience, obviously went back to the UK very regularly, hence the accent. Obviously after uni, spent a bit of time overseas and came back into Hong Kong. So yeah, it's been quite an amazing journey.
From 2005 to 2006, you were initially an English teacher with Saxon Court Group. Can you talk a little bit to your experience teaching business English with them?
Yeah, so growing up in Hong Kong, obviously I'd seen what I had gone through in kind of the 80s, especially the 90s as a teenager. I wanted to go and experience Shanghai because in my mind and around that time, I felt that Shanghai might have that kind of energy and vibe going on, a place where anything is possible, huge amount of work is going on. And that was kind of what happened when I arrived, right? Shanghai was pretty wild. There was, I think, 1/3 of the world's cranes were in the city at the same time because they were building towards the World Expo, which was a couple of years later. And obviously it was trying to build it as a big financial hub. So, Shanghai was just crazy time, crazy place to be. Did also go to try and learn a bit of Mandarin. That was part of the plan. Go there, you teach English and they help you teach you Mandarin. But unfortunately, as sometimes happens, there was no teaching of Mandarin. You're just teaching English and you had to kind of pick up what you could on your own. But look, it was a great experience. I had a wonderful year there. Probably wouldn't live there again, having gone through it, but I enjoyed the time that I had, and that experience definitely impacted on what came afterwards.
Fantastic. In the years that followed, you had a few different positions. One I'd like to talk about was London Development Agency,
right.
Where you were a policy and government relations officer. Can you tell us perhaps about a project or initiative that you worked on during your time there that you might be proud of?
Sure. So I'd had a bit of experience in Hong Kong already as a headhunter for another company. So I had a few years doing headhunting and financial services, but I just felt that there was more I needed to learn. So what actually happened is I took a 1-year sabbatical. The employer at the time were really good about it. They were like, sure, you go and do what you need to do. There'll be a job for you when you come back. So I took a sabbatical, went and did a master's in London. While doing that master's full time, I also wanted to work because, I didn't want to live off my savings for a whole year. Yeah. So there was two things. One was the university actually would put you into a program, which was how the LDA opportunity came up. And then I also found some other work on my own on the side. LDA, which doesn't exist anymore, was a quango. So it was meant to be a sort of pseudo-government body, dealing with private organizations. Big projects I was working on. One was the Olympics, which was actually quite exciting, right? Yeah. So to be involved in the London Olympics and sort of seeing all the planning that went into that was pretty cool. And then the second one was doing policy on the upcoming election in 2010, which was a hung parliament, right? It was one of the first times that it happened in forever. So it was kind of doing research on what would happen, the impacts of that, and then what would lead from it. So it was great to sort of do something completely different, very much sort of policy-led, a lot more research, dealing with different organizations. And then I think to kind of build a skill set that complemented like the natural sales that you get as a headhunter. And that was kind of the idea behind it.
Fantastic. You must have picked up a lot of skills from some of these early roles that you were in. EcoConnect was another one where you were a business development manager. How did your work there sort of shape your understanding of the intersection between business and sustainability?
So what I was doing in the Masters was mainly studying the carbon markets. So that was it was an interest that I had, was the EU carbon emission scheme. So I was doing a lot of research into that. So EcoConnect was linked to that. EcoConnect was a CleanTech lobby group. So we would basically be lobbying the government, members of parliament. We would be hosting events. We were also speaking to venture capitalists and other enterprises. So it was kind of cool because you're at the nexus of all these different groups. You host different events, seminars, talks, things like that. Working with an inspirational guy called Robert Hoken, going to give him a shout out because he's a wonderful, passionate person. He's doing a lot of good for Europe. And so some of the first things that we did were dealing with the electric vehicles. So looking into like the Nissan Leaf, so working with Nissan, trying to introduce them to other enterprises, other investors, then also working with the government to try and manufacture subsidies for these businesses to increase adoption. So it was quite cool to sort of see all of these like cutting edge projects that were going on from the climate tech perspective. So again, it wasn't quite sales, it wasn't quite policy, it was a bit of both. And but it gave me experience dealing with a lot of other industries, and I think that's what I wanted to get out of it, was that again a more rounded experience. But I absolutely loved doing what I did there, and yeah, I think Robert's been doing some really cool stuff in the UK since then.
Between 2007 and 2012, you were involved as a managing consultant with Carrington Fox, part of the Weber Fox group.
Yeah.
They obviously have an exclusive client list. How did you approach building and maintaining relationships with high-profile clients there? And can you tell us a little bit about trust and the sort of qualities that you took on there in terms of headhunting?
Yeah, so look, headhunters get a bad rap, right? It's infamous because there are a lot of bad headhunters out there, is the fact. I think for every good one, there's probably a bad one out there. So it's quite a high percentage of those that maybe don't follow the right practices. So that obviously affects the entire industry. But you do want to try and stand out, and there's a few things you can do to stand out there. So coming into Carrington Fox, I was hired by a guy that I'm still very good friends with, Rupert Hay. Actually saw him earlier today for a coffee. He really kind of helped guide me at the beginning of my career. I was coming out of university. I'd done 1 year in Shanghai. Was trying to still kind of find what was it I was looking to do, with my career. And I could be very honest with that. There was definitely that feeling at 21, sort of, where am I going to be going with this? And Carrington Fox was an amazing opportunity, not just because of what it could do in terms of remuneration, and it's a role that can pay well if you succeed. But I learned a lot, and at a very relatively early stage, you're dealing with hedge funds, investment banks, asset managers, sometimes family offices, individuals that are extremely talented and well educated, might be managing billions of dollars, and you're getting to work with them on quite complex mandates. So you have to be quite agile, you have to adapt. And I think the key thing to stand out is there's always integrity. Without a doubt, it's about integrity. But a lot of people say that, but very few actually follow through on it. But people are smart and they pick up on it. And it's not something you can necessarily show in a 1 hour meeting, but over a couple of years, you start to build a reputation, right? And they say it takes years to build a reputation, seconds to destroy it. But it's true. You've got to look at things in the long term. I think being a Hong Konger helped. There was no chance of me coming here for a couple of years, going back to London and going to Sydney. I was here for the long term. So when I met with candidates, that's what I was trying to present to them. We're going to build a relationship over time. Maybe we'll find you a role now, maybe we won't. Maybe it'll be 2 or 3 years down the line. But you'll remember every interaction you have with me as a positive one. And you'll come out of it, maybe I won't place you, but maybe you'll learn some market intel, which helps you. Maybe we'll talk about some other trends that benefit you. And that's kind of how you build that relationship over time. And a lot of those candidates, eventually they became clients, right? And that was kind of what was very interesting, is by the end of that time there wasn't really a need to do any BD, because you just had inbound inquiries coming to you because people trusted you and they referred you to their friends. They moved and got a new role, they had to hire, they would contact me. And that's, I think, the best way to create that kind of like echo chamber of success.
Yeah. Now, through that time, 2012 onwards, you were obviously a director of Silverstrand Executive Search. Perhaps you could speak a little bit to how Silverstrand adapted its executive search process, through the rise of remote work, the pandemic, how they adapted to accounting for the changing nature of work and of the job market.
Sure. So Silverstrand came about when the old firm Carrington Fox made the strategic decision to move the Asia HQ to Singapore. Right. So they said to me and one of the other senior consultants, would you guys want like to relocate to Singapore? Otherwise, we're going to be closing the office. So myself and the other guy there, Dennis Lowe, we made the decision that we wanted to stay here. He's also a Hong Konger with spent a lot of time in Canada, a lot of strong family ties, and we realized we had a natural complement between us. He was dealing with a lot of regional firms, I was dealing with more international firms. He did a lot of headhunting in Cantonese and Mandarin, I did all of mine in English. So we had quite a nice natural complement, and we also worked well together as personalities. I think this is something that's really critical, and throughout my career, I've always had co-founders. Everything I've done, I've had co-founders because one, I enjoy working with people. Two, I'm fairly good at working with people, I think. But I identify my strengths, and I also identify the strengths in others. And I know how they can help us as a team to be better. And I think it takes a lot of introspection to sort of know that, and a bit of humility sometimes, because you have to also identify maybe what are not your strengths. And that was kind of what worked well with Dennis, is we could see that we would have a good partnership. And that business was set up in 2012. It obviously grew over the years. Coming back to your question, when the pandemic hit, look, there was a big change that happened, right? 2020 was scary for a lot of people. A lot of people around the world didn't know how to adapt. Big firms hadn't gone through digital transformation. They weren't prepared for this. They weren't prepared for working from home. In Hong Kong, we'd gone through SARS, we'd gone through bird flu, we'd gone through swine flu. We'd had a few other pandemics on a smaller scale. Yeah. So the population knew what to do, even if the organizations didn't. So obviously the first thing was to adapt from working from home. I think as a smaller firm, you can do that. It's much easier to implement cloud-based tools, CRMs, other project management software, using things like Slack for internal communications, link that up with your Google and all the other tools that you're using. Obviously using Google Meets, doing remote calls. One of the key things is there was a daily call every day, a daily call every single day to run through the roles, the candidates, and market news. And what it does aligns every single person at the beginning of that day so they know what they're going to do. And then they can stay in touch with everyone through Slack. So that was kind of how we sort of adapted to COVID during that time and allowed the business to actually thrive and grow to its biggest ever during that period.
Sure. Can you tell us more about the experience co-founding Grapevine Daily, and how did that inform your approach to your current work in the investment and recruiting space?
Right. So Grapevine Daily came about because myself and Dennis, who are the partners at Silverstrand, were using the SFC database to help us verify candidates' credentials. Because as you'll know, with your background, if you're a financial services professional, you have to be licensed type 1 to 9. And that is something that's publicly verifiable and also searchable. Dave Webb runs a website, which is also something, it's a very good catalog of that. It's great, right? So the idea was we were using this anyway, but could we come up and do this in a more systematic way? So we reached out to a guy that is now my business partner at Zetl, an inspirational guy called Shan Han. Shan, worked in hedge funds and investment banks previously. He could also code. So we've known each other about 13 years now. He was actually a candidate of mine that I tried to headhunt. Didn't take a role, but I never held it against him, didn't hold a grudge. And as sometimes happen, you develop a bond with somebody. And we just naturally connected. And again, I could see immediately that the strengths and the qualities that he had. So Dennis and I went to him and he said, look, we want to create a scraping algorithm that will look at the updates in the SFC database and day to day match them, and then with the changes send an email directly to verify those changes. So what would happen is you could see that Bank of America has just added 6 type 6 professionals, but has cut 12 type 1 professionals, and you can even see the names of those individuals.
Perfect.
So what we only did like version 1 of that. Version 2 is we were going to then link it to social media profiles. So you would be able to see that update and then immediately click on like a LinkedIn page, take it to their page. So as a recruiter, an amazing tool that is. So we built it. We were kind of using it in-house for a while. We decided to just launch it for free. So we just put it out there in the market. Got a couple hundred signups in Hong Kong, mainly with financial services recruiters. And it was a great little tool. We never really got to monetize it. We never really got to take it as far as we would like to. But it was kind of the first time using technology. That was the first time sort of seeing how recruitment tech, at least, rec tech, could be implemented to improve a process. And we actually, that won us an award. So Silverstrand won Best Newcomer in about 2016 on the back of this product, actually, for building it and then launching it and putting it out there. So that was kind of the first time of sort of seeing the power of tech and what that could do to change an established business.
From 2017 onwards, you were also director of Cleverly Search. Can you speak a little bit to the challenges and opportunities that you see in the construction industry in Asia, and how Cleverly Search is addressing them through its recruitment services?
Sure. So Cleverly Search came about because I had another partner who was from the industry, pretty well connected, saw that there was a gap in the market to basically try and replicate a Silverstrand model, which was financial services, and do this for the built environment. So engineers, architects, project managers, that type of thing. Right. And I think a lot of the firms that have been doing it traditionally maybe took a slightly different approach to it. And the idea was to kind of bring a certain level of professionalism to it from financial services, where the bar is very, very high, and legal as well, the bar is extremely high. Sometimes other industries, it may not be quite the same. And the idea is to obviously bring those standards and make it uniform, which actually for a lot of people in the industry, it has become that now. But, maybe 6 years ago, it wasn't quite the case. So that was the logic behind it. Again, doing everything with integrity, trying to make sure you give the best practice to your candidates and clients, and again, looking at it in the longer term. So that was kind of how it all came about. It's a very different kind of industry, though, because financial services, particularly if you're looking at mid to senior level, you're looking at much larger fees per individual placement, but there might be fewer throughout the year. In the built environment, first of all, the fees tend to be lower, so the percentages are lower, salaries are lower, but it tends to be higher volume because a lot of people will work on a project, and then once that project is completed, you will naturally find your next role. So it's not necessarily the same way that you're resigning and taking a new job. It's just that the project comes to its end of its natural life cycle and you move on to the next thing. And a lot of the individuals in that space, they're very inquisitive, right? They want to build bridges and tunnels and, huge skyscrapers. And so there's that passion that follows them in every role that they go to. So there tends to be a lot more movement, I would say, in that particular industry.
You're a partner with Tyros.
Yeah.
It's and have been so since 2016. What are some of the key criteria that Tyros looks for in its potential portfolio company investments?
Sure. So Tyros is looking at anything from sort of pre-seed up to pre-series A. So it's very early stage, normally sort of 25 to $50,000 ticket sizes. So it's very much that early stage. So there is a lot of risk that comes with that. Any early stage investment is a huge amount of risk. The statistics say that something up to about 90% of all startups will fail within 5 years. So you look at the numbers, that's an extremely risky project to be involved in. So you do have to be a little bit cautious. Other firms will go and just print tickets out to 50 different companies and hope that one of them becomes a unicorn, right? And some of the biggest VCs in the world, they might take that approach. Others don't. They might be a little bit more structured in what they do. So the idea was to kind of just limit it to areas where there was already some expertise, which was mainly fintech, HR tech, recruitment, and then sort of ESG, which was kind of aligned with the built environment. That's been going for a few years now. That hasn't made a huge amount of investments this year, to be honest with you. They're a bit more cautious. Did do one back in March, which was an ESG business. But at the moment is probably we're just waiting on the sidelines just to see how the market plays out. Because I think there's a bit more volatility to come for the rest of this year.
RH Vodcast, powered by Hong Kong, an authentic lifestyle brand inspired by our home cities, melting pot of cultures and charisma. They ship worldwide. You can shop online or visit the Hong Kong store. In 2018, you founded Zetl.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about Zetl and what inspired you to found the fintech platform?
Yeah, so Shan, as I mentioned, is a co-founder and CEO of that business. We have another co-founder in Singapore, Matt Roberts, who's got a very good structured finance and private debt background. So the idea behind Zetl was that I was already, a co-founder of 2 recruitment businesses, and I was frustrated with the lack of financing options in the market available to asset-light businesses. So traditionally, if you want to get financing as a business, you would go to a bank, you would post a physical asset as collateral. It could be some real estate or inventory or something else that you hold, and that will be the collateral the bank uses to give you a loan. Now, if you don't have that, what do you have? You have invoices. Now, banks do trade finance, but again, there will be hard physical commodities as the collateral there. It's a bit rarer for them to just look at an invoice for a candidate that's been placed and provide you with financing against that or factor that invoice. So that was kind of the first level. Was, we were a bit frustrated about how the bank wouldn't do this, and it was really funny. There was one bank that we'd spoken to, and we were trying to get them to factor an invoice, and the invoice was actually for a candidate that had been placed at that bank. And they said no. They rejected it outright. I'm like, why? Well, how do we know that this invoice is not fraudulent? I'm like, you can check on the internal database that this person is working there. What is the issue here? So, it just showed us like how inefficient they are. There was a couple of other alternative lenders out there, but again, they were just doing trade finance, cross-border finance, supply chain finance, moving goods from Hong Kong to Singapore to Europe and elsewhere. So again, it was a very different type of business. So being an entrepreneur, again, the idea was, okay, there's no solution that exists. Can we build this solution? How do we go about building this solution? Clearly, I didn't have the right background with product, and I didn't know how to build the debt model that we would need to make it work. And that was kind of the first step. So, okay, if I can't do it myself, how can I do this? Well, I know this guy who's very talented in product and in finance. That was Shan. Then got introduced to another individual who was very talented. That was Matt in Singapore. And the three of us basically, towards the end of 2018, started to sort of put together the pieces of what became the model of this business, right? So using a data set that we had, started to put this together, reached out to about a dozen different recruitment business owners and said, look, we're going to build a financing platform for recruiters, as it was then. Would you use this? And got about 10 of them to sign like a proof of concept document, just a one-page document saying, if this product existed, I would use it, right? Something simple. And then we started to field calls from these guys asking us, is it ready yet? Is the platform up and running? We want to use it. And we're like, okay, maybe this does actually have some legs. So basically did like a friends and family round, we call it, in 2019, raised enough money to actually start lending. And we went live in summer 2019 in Hong Kong and Singapore. Started off with basically just recruitment business owners in Hong Kong and Singapore. And we started to look at their invoices and finance against them. And that was really how it began, with one product in one sector. And then it's kind of just grown from there.
Can you walk us through the process of how a business can apply for financing through Zetl, and what are the requirements to qualify?
Got it. So like I mentioned, that was where we began. The business originated and developed from there. So 4 years now, fast forward 4 years, we have customers in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Australia, and we can also provide financing to the UK. We started off looking at just recruitment, then expanded into sort of more broadly professional services, so agencies, consultancies, then technology companies, and actually now even have traditional businesses, F&B, retail, even also some trade finance customers. So it's a more diversified portfolio now. The idea is it's a fintech. So how do you use technology to automate many of these processes? So the whole sign-up can be done, first of all, online. So you can log on to zetl.com, zetl.com, a four-letter .com domain. Pretty amazing to actually have that, to be honest with you. It's quite rare these days. All the words have been taken. You can sign up through there. Everything is done online. You can use your cloud accounting software. They say you're using Xero or QuickBooks. You can actually click one button and we have read-only access to that. We've also just launched an open banking API integration with an aggregator. So what that means is, again, you click another button, we can even see your bank statement data. You don't have to go and like print it out or download it and submit it. So everything can be done basically automatically through there. You do obviously need to submit things like your BRC, business registration, certificate of incumbency, all of that. Once you've done the integrations, uploaded that information, then you submit your service agreements and invoices, which is basically the collateral that we take, right? So the beauty of the model that we built is this is financing platform aimed at asset-light companies initially. So they don't have physical assets to post as collateral, but they have invoices. What we really like is B2B businesses, because the beauty of the model is you might be a small consultancy, perhaps, but you might be working with enterprise level clients. So your invoice is actually going to be with maybe a large blue chip organization, right? It could be investment grade quality. So the beauty is, okay, we're maybe lending to slightly higher yielding type customers, but the end debtor actually is going to be an investment grade quality, double B rated or higher type company. So that gives us some security there. So all of that can be done online. We offer virtual accounts. So these are like lockbox accounts. They are an account that we do control in escrow, but it's a joint account. So that can even go on the invoices that you send out to your customers, and that will settle into a joint account. Again, if you do that, we can offer preferential rates. Some of the other things that we can do now, which you couldn't do years ago, is we have EDDAs. So that's a direct debit authorization. Let's say there was some issue and the money didn't settle into that account and it went into another account, we would be able to, through the DDA, actually withdraw those funds, directly just to the cap that is set. So a few of those things are in place. Otherwise, we try and avoid asking for a personal guarantee if we can avoid it.
Yeah.
We will, though, ask for like a corporate guarantee, which is like a floating charge that you register at Accra in Singapore, and the company's registry in Hong Kong. But basically, through doing this, we're able to provide this type of financing to these types of businesses who wouldn't traditionally have been able to access it. And there's obviously a huge amount out there. The service sector economy is a huge portion already in Hong Kong and Singapore, but a fast-growing portion of the economy in Southeast Asia, and that's where it's really exciting. So we're in Malaysia and the Philippines. We're already sort of looking at deals now in Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. There's huge potential in those markets before you even touch on, say, India and other markets further out. So that's why I think it's going to get very exciting over the next few years, is sort of expanding into these new emerging markets.
In terms of industry sectors, where do you get the most traction? Which industries do you see benefiting the most from Zetl's products?
Yeah, I mean, look, given where we started, of course, there is HR and staffing. That's a decent a chunk of the portfolio now. We do have digital marketing and design studios as well as customers. We also have a lot of technology companies, as I mentioned. Some of these are VC-backed. Others might not be, SaaS-type businesses as well. And then, as I said, we do also have traditional businesses. In terms of the breakdown, I would say there's still somewhat of a heavier weighting towards services businesses, so consultancies and agencies, followed by tech companies, followed by traditional businesses. But because of how we've managed to grow and diversify, we really can cover pretty much most sectors now. Maybe we don't do real estate financing, for instance, but most other sectors we can cover.
As a leader of Zetl, how have you adapted the company to the challenges of the pandemic and really the effect on the business landscape in Asia?
Right. So the great thing is, because when we started, we were already a diversified team. Shannon and me were here. Matt was in Singapore. We already had set everything up to work remotely. So when we went live in 2019, everything was on the cloud. The entire process we had. And again, because we were looking to offer digital finance, the whole point was you don't have to go and meet me in person. We can do everything online. We use e-signatures. We look at soft copy documentation. So everything is done remotely and digital. So when COVID hit, it actually didn't affect our processes internally at all, because we were already set up to do this about a year before COVID arrived. Where it did have an impact was obviously externally. So like I was alluding to earlier, all of these large enterprises, right? It's like trying to turn the Titanic. They cannot change in a month. It doesn't happen. You have to go through so many layers of hierarchy. You have to get approvals. You have to change legacy systems. You can't just say, all right, everyone work from home. We're going to set all of you up from home. You could have tens of thousands of employees. You just can't do that. So what happens is all of these businesses went working from home, and then all of their suppliers, many of them in the services sector, weren't getting paid because their procurement and finance teams were not able to offer them that financing the traditional way. You go into the office, everything's approved and paid. They weren't set up to do this from home. So what happened in sort of March, all the way through Q2 and even partly into Q3, a lot of these firms, they just weren't getting settlement for invoices that had been drawn up and were due payment. So we naturally stepped in there. So I don't want to say it was fortuitous because it was a horrible thing that occurred, but can't ignore the fact that did lead to growth in the business. We were able to step in and provide financing when firms were really struggling. Banks were not able to deal because they were inundated with demand, right? And that was kind of what, I guess, kickstarted our growth. And, I look at the growth rates, 2020 all the way up until last year, it was rapid. And of course, it does align with what happened with COVID.
You're obviously enabling an underserved part of the market. Do you have any memorable success stories or case studies that come to mind of businesses that have benefited from Zetl's financing?
Definitely, yeah. There was an IT consulting business that had a number of contractors on their book. So these contractors, web developers, software developers, they were providing services to a variety of other customers. Payment terms were, obviously they have to pay these contractors every 30 days. Payment terms of their customers were normally 60 days. So COVID hit, and their clients said, we can't pay you. And they had all of these contractors on the book. And, there was, I think, something like 20 contractors. So you do the maths, 20 contractors, each one on maybe 50 grand a month honky. You add that up. That's pretty scary as a founder. And that's going out every month. And they didn't get paid 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And it was all founders' money going into it. So, they started scrambling. They were looking to speak to family and friends to raise money through equity. And we were like, we basically got introduced. So we're like, look, we're here. we can actually come and solve this problem for you. We looked at the invoices that they had, looked at their contractor detail, looked at the payroll details, and we came in and provided them with financing against it. They were able to obviously address the shortfall that they had, and thankfully, wasn't exactly a month, it was about 6 weeks later, their customers did finally settle. So they were looking on the brink of having to shut the business, right? Yeah. And there could have been not just the 20 contractors, there was also 10 full-time staff. There was going to be 30 people unemployed there, possibly. And Hong Kong didn't quite have the same furlough as you saw in other parts of the world, particularly in the UK. So that was probably one that we were really proud that we were able to come in and enable that business to survive and then thrive. And there were other similar cases to that, similar types of situations, but that was probably the big one where you had a lot of large contractors on your book. That was the biggest use case.
Can you speak to the future plans and vision for Zetl in terms of expansion or potentially serving more businesses in the region?
Yeah, so we're in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines. We have a customer in Australia. We can do financing in the UK. As I mentioned, we're really excited by Southeast Asia, so we're already scoping out go-to-market expansion into Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. My co-founder Shan was actually in Japan a couple of months back, where we've been approved by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government to open there. And they actually subsidize your expansion there in partnership with Ernst & Young. So that's going to be the next market for us. People think Japan, why Japan? First of all, he grew up in Tokyo, so he is Japanese, which really helps when you're doing business there. He speaks fluent Japanese. But Japan is the second biggest contractor market in the world. Few people know that. There is a huge opportunity there. And if you're a foreign business, it's actually very hard to access Japanese bank financing. It's not the easiest as a foreign business to do it. Of course, Japanese bank lending rates are amazingly low, but it's actually mainly for Japanese businesses. So because of those two factors, we see a huge opportunity in that market, 130 million population, right? And then Southeast Asia, you're looking at about 650 million people. So that's really where we're quite excited and where we're going to be going into over the next year.
Looking outside of Zetl at some of your more philanthropic interests, you are a founding board member of the Eurasian Society. Can you tell us a little bit more about the organization's approach to economic empowerment?
Sure. So the Eurasian Society came about over a number of years. So myself, I'm Eurasian, as I mentioned. So my dad's from the UK. Mum grew up in Ceylon. She was from a community called the Portuguese Burghers, Burghers, not burger like McDonald's. And they are a relatively small community of Eurasians over many generations. You know, her mother can trace her roots in Ceylon for about 200 something years. Originally were missionaries. You know, her father actually originally came from Calcutta, but family had links to Goa, right? So ridiculous background. I'm born in Hong Kong, right? I'm not Chinese. So, you know, it kind of played into that feeling already of being like a third culture kid, you know, always had that growing up, you know, being in like 2 or 3 different worlds, but never quite in any one of them either. And there's been this Eurasian identity in many other parts of the world that was not quite as established in Hong Kong. So in Singapore, they have a Singapore Eurasian Association. It's been going for over 100 years, you know, and actually underneath Singapore law, Eurasians are counted as an ethnicity. And they actually due subsidies from the government. So their clubhouse was built by the government. They can offer welfare programs to underprivileged members of the community. They can offer education endowments. They can do all sorts of amazing things in partnership with the government because they are classified as an ethnic group. Indian, Chinese, Westerners, Malay, and then and also Eurasians. Hong Kong's never had this. In other parts of Southeast Asia, they have. I think Hong Kong, you know, there was a bit of a taboo. There was a taboo historically, going all the way back to like the 19th century when a lot of early Eurasians were maybe, you know, mixed relationships between, you know, maybe hacker boat people and military officers or people in the civil service. So maybe that was what kind of culminated it, but there was never really any kind of organization uniting people. And you know, having seen how these exist in other places, myself and a few other like-minded people felt the same way. One of the other main drivers of this was my brother Alan. You know, he was also passionate. He felt very similarly to this. I remember looking back to my wedding in 2017. I look at the photo now of all of my groomsmen, and all but one, who was my cousin, are Eurasians. I didn't intend this. It just so happened, I guess, that I just naturally connected with them because they also had this experience of being in 2 or 3 different worlds at the same time. My wife Aisha, I have to give her a shout out as well. I can't forget my wife. I love her. And of course, we've also got a son now, Elian. He's 3 months old, and he's also Eurasian. He's 50% Indian via my wife Aisha, who grew up in Hong Kong but is originally from India, and he's also mixed through me. So this is going to be the world that he also inhabits. Look, it's fascinating, right? There was a big expansion in the late 70s, early 80s. It coincided with the Big Bang, financial deregulation and globalization. And you actually see the numbers spike of mixed race children around that time because people traveled around the world for business and for other opportunities. So the idea was, okay, look, we've identified there is maybe a community here. What can we do? What can we actually do to make a difference? And the idea was, well, look, a lot of the community that we were engaging with were relatively well off, relatively privileged. Do you want to try and support other individuals that might not be? And that was kind of how it began. So we've hosted a few different events. We've done a few things online. We've done fundraisers with other charities. So main partners are Pathfinders. Catherine is wonderful. And also Grassroots Futures with Tegan. Those are the two charities we've been supporting over the last couple of years, raised money for them each year. At the moment, the organization functions to raise money for other charities. Longer term, the idea is to actually become a Section 88 company in Hong Kong, which means we would ourselves be a true non-profit. And the idea is longer term, we also want to be able to run similar programs to what they do in Singapore. So providing welfare to underprivileged members of the community, being able to support students as well in different schools, particularly local schools, to achieve and get into top universities and try and support that. Some of the other things that we do, which again only came about after we set it up, is we realize that a lot of Eurasians have quite rare blood types and are actually unable to find matching blood donors and bone marrow donors. A lot of people don't know this. So we've done 2 campaigns. One was for a lovely kid called Alfie Pickney in the UK who has aplastic anemia. So he needed to find a blood donor match. And we basically put the word out on all our social medias, on our newsletter, shared the word with everyone we met. And the idea was get down to your local Red Cross and get your blood tested, get it into a blood bank and find out if there's a match. Because of his unique genetic makeup, he needed a Eurasian donor. There was him, and then there's another one that we're sort of just very early stages going to do, but a poor chap in LA who has a blood disease. And again, same issue, he can't find a donor. And so we're going to try and do the same thing. So the key things of what we do is raising awareness, providing education opportunities, and then also giving people opportunities to work. And that's probably the third component of it. So there's a lot, and I can ramble on for hours, which I won't. But yeah, it's something that a few of us do together. There's about 8 of 9 of us now on the general committee doing it.
Moving on to just a couple of more general areas. You're a long-time resident of Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. You base your business here, your home here, your family here. How do you feel about the outlook for Hong Kong? And why are you so invested in this place as opposed to some of the other Asian centres?
Yeah, I mean, look, Hong Kong has had a pretty rough 4 years, as we can all acknowledge, right? There was 3 years of COVID, there was the protests in 2019, so, we can't ignore that. Statistically, we've seen a lot of immigration, right? There's over 200,000 that have already left and more expected to go. It's had an impact on the economy and obviously had an impact on society. Now, this year, as we've opened up from COVID, it does feel like there's a bit of a bounce back going on. You can see it when you look on the streets. There is an energy again. Events are back. Even just looking around the city, you can see it's more active. Look, I was born here. My wife grew up here. I've got a son who was born here. My brother lives here. My cousin came over from the UK to be here because I was here. I just moved my mum over from Malaysia in March. She now lives here, and my wife's aunt also lives here. We have deep, deep roots. None of us are Cantonese, but we all love the city. We acknowledge definitely the challenges that it's been through. Would I say that we're completely over them? Of course not. There's stuff in the press all the time. But Hong Kong has been through a lot in the last 170 years, right? It's been through all sorts of things, world wars, financial crises, pandemics. It does feel like one of the most intense, certainly in my lifetime. But I do have like a firm belief that we are already on the path to recovery. And I think there's still going to be a lot more success here. And I'm already hearing, friends who've moved to Singapore, Dubai, UK and elsewhere who are already thinking of coming back. They moved there in the last 2 years and they've gone, you know what, the grass isn't always that much greener on the other side. And they do want to come back because Hong Kong, where else in the world can you get up, go for a swim, go to the office in the city, go for a hike in the evening, and do it all within 15 minutes taxi ride. There's nowhere else in the world that really could do that. And that's quite a rare thing to have. So no, we're here for the long term.
In our demographic of our audience, there are plenty of younger people. This goes out on a variety of different platforms. You're a prolific entrepreneur, very successful. You're one of the most connected people in Hong Kong. I can attest to that. Are there any nuggets of wisdom or any values that you might be able to impart to people coming through who want to one day be in your shoes?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it earlier. It really depends on your own personality. There's no one cookie cutter approach. Every person is different. So what works for one person doesn't work for the other. And any coaches that go out and say that is incorrect. So I can talk about my own experience, and that might make sense to some people and it might make no sense to others. So I said it already. Integrity. Always try and do things with integrity. Don't fake it. People can see through it. Really mean it. And it's quite rare to actually be able to show that. But people can sense that if they think you're being really genuine with them. So that's probably one. Two, for me personally, co-founders. I love bouncing ideas off people. I like to work with a partner or two or three. I like to have other individuals that complement each other. And like I said, I think you need a bit of humility and a lot of introspection to identify what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and what is a good person that's going to complement and balance that out. So certainly for me, co-founders is another one. So other individuals, they want to control it all, and that's up to them, and that's fine. So that would be the second one, I would say. And apart from that is, yes, look, work ethic is important. Clearly done a lot of things in my career, do a lot of things now. Time management is one of the most crucial skills that I've learned over the years. Wasn't so good in the past, but now, I look at my calendar, break my day into 30-minute blocks, whether it's going to be something personal or something for work, break it down that way, look at it ahead of time than the previous night, know what I've got coming up and be prepared for it psychologically. And then there's other sort of, things that a lot of people are already starting to do, but obviously meditation does help. Meditate every morning. Exercise, I do try and exercise every single day. I may not look it, but I do try and exercise every single day, and I do feel like I get that rush of endorphins afterwards. Normally try and go at lunchtime, because then in the afternoon I get no lull, and you can power through in the evening. Okay. So those are the main three I'd say individually. As an employer, as somebody who has managed a lot of people in over the years, there's always three main tenets that I go by. It's really, really simple. And I think sometimes people get lost and they forget the basics. And I think the key thing is you treat people well, you pay them fairly, and you have a bit of fun while you're doing it. And you just follow these three simple things. And actually you'll find that people enjoy what they do, and they stay, and they feel rewarded, and they will give their best.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, learning about your diverse experiences in the financial and recruitment industry, as well as your passion for philanthropic work. You demonstrate obviously a commitment to creating positive change, promoting economic empowerment in cultural organizations. Your involvement highlights, a belief in the power of community, collaboration. We very much appreciate your insights into these spheres, as well as hearing about your personal journey. So thank you very much for your time, and it was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
All right. Welcome back to the RH Vodcast, powered by Hong Kong, an authentic lifestyle brand inspired by our home city's melting pot of cultures and charisma. They ship worldwide. You can shop online or visit the Hong Kong store.